What do you do when you have a teenager that stays cold all the time? You embroider them a blanket, of course. Please join me today as we embroider this gorgeous Sherpa blanket that I got from Walmart. And Walmart also offers Sherpa jackets as well. And you can embroider on this material quite successfully, especially utilizing this knockdown or tack down stitch that's behind the embroidery design. So I look forward to you joining me as we embroider this super plush blanket together. As I mentioned in the outset, the blanket that we're going to work with today is for my daughter. And it is this super thick, fuzzy blanket that I got from Walmart. It is the lightweight Sherpa throw. And I, unfortunately, at the moment, can't remember how much I paid for it. But it wasn't more than maybe $9–10 for this super soft blanket. And the design that I'm going to put on here for her is a pretty big size design. It's 7 inches, it's round, and it is a symbol for one of her favorite anime series. So that's what we're going to do with this today. I'm going to go ahead and take it loose so that we can take a look at the thickness of the pile of it. So it's held on with, of course, some plastic ties, and as you see, it's the same on both sides. It's super fuzzy on both sides. So that being the case, in order to get a design to show up on this surface, what I'm going to do is what's called a tack down, all right, or a pile drop, or a description along those lines. But what it essentially boils down to is there's going to be an array of crossing stitches that's going to drop the pile or flatten this soft fuzzy fabric so that we can put a design on here and you can actually see it, right? Because if we were to embroider just on this directly, then the embroidery in most instances would be lost. All right, so now the design that I'm actually going to put on here for her could be thick enough where we wouldn't necessarily need a pile drop, but I really want it to stand out. All right, I want it to be, you know, super cute, and I want folks to be able to see it at first glance without it being washed out or overshadowed by the actual pile. So what we're going to use today to accomplish this project is our 15 needle Redline machine. Super excited to work with that on this particular project. And I'm going to use our round embroidery tubular hoops. Okay, so here is our round hoop that we're going to use, and this one is marked 7.87 inches, so it's plenty big enough for us to put that design on the blanket. Under normal circumstances, or under a lot of circumstances, you with using a pile drop, even like on a towel, pile drop is made so that you don't have to use the water soluble topping on top. But on the back of this, because it is a blanket that's going to be stretched and washed and things of that magnitude, I'm not feeling using a tearaway. We could use a tearaway, but the problem with using a tearaway with the pile drop is usually once you tear that stabilizer away, you're able to see the tearaway through the holes in the grid. And you'll see what I'm talking about as soon as we do the design, and I'll show you what it looks like with the cutaway. But for the time being, I want this to last a good long time. It is a pretty stretchy fabric, so I'm going to go ahead and just use our cutaway. And fortunately, the wonderful folks down there at Metro EMB sent some super soft cutaway stabilizer. Right, this cutaway stabilizer is thick, but it's really soft, so I know it's going to hold up really well behind this design. So I'm going to switch the camera so that we can go ahead and hoop the blanket, and I can explain that process, and then we'll get started with the embroidery. What we're going to do is go ahead and measure for our stabilizer. So here I'm going to put my scissors right here to the side and lay the stabilizer out, and I'm going to just put the hoop down. What I also could do is just put the outer ring only down, because of course you want the stabilizer to be bigger than the outer ring. So I'm gonna move it up just a little bit and go ahead and cut this out. I want a nice generous circle. The reason, or nice generous square, and the reason being is because I don't want this to shift too much out of the way it's supposed to be on the hoop while adjusting the blanket. So let's roll this up, and we'll go ahead and put this out of the way because we have our stabilizer that is big enough. And now that we have this, I can go ahead and start the process of hooping the blanket. Now, under normal circumstances with a blanket like this, there's a couple of things that you can do. You can measure the blanket. Like, say for instance, if I wanted the design centered, of course, one of the easiest ways is to fold the blanket in half, mark the center at the halfway point. You could probably put a pin right here, because marking the blanket with a water soluble marker with this style blanket is not going to work. So you can put a pin right here and then measure up from there how far up you want the design to go. But one of the easiest things I suggest with this particular blanket is, because it's so fuzzy and so furry, just do one corner, all right? And it's pretty easy to measure from the corner if you take the time to look at it that way. So we know that the design is not going to be bigger than our 7x7 or almost 8-inch hoop. So right here in the corner is pretty much where the design is going to go. We'll put it a little bit further up, but for the most part, that's going to be it. All right, so I'm going to double check. This is the back side of the blanket. This is the front, so that's great. And as I pointed out, our inside hoop nests inside our outside hoop. All right, so the outside hoop and the stabilizer is going to go under the blanket. So let's go ahead and put that in place. And with that in place, I'm going to go ahead and feel where this circle is. So this is going to take a measure of experience, where what I generally do is eyeball where this is going. And of course, because it's for my daughter, it doesn't have to be spot on. I want it to be, but it doesn't have to be. But at the end of the day, to show you guys properly, I want to show you what I look for in getting my designs to be spot on. So we did check under here. The stabilizer is on the hoop, even though, look at there, it's right there at the edge. So I'm gonna move this over and then place this back down, because we definitely don't want that stabilizer to shift under there. All right, and so as I cup my hands around the hoop, which lets me know about where the hoop is. So from the edge, that looks great to me. When I come and cup from the sides, what I'm looking for is how close my hands are to the edge. You know, if they look about the same distance, then I'm good to go. All right. Now, if you wanted to, yes, you could take a measuring stick or ruler and measure the exact distance at certain angles, equal distance from the corner. I'm not going through that. You guys know how I feel about math. So we're going to do this the quick and dirty way and just go ahead and hoop our blanket. So I'm going to go ahead and put pressure on here. Now, I don't know if I've loosened it enough prior to hooping, but I was doing a jacket beforehand, so I'm hoping the thickness is going to be about the same. So once we get our hoop and we feel that it's inside the frame of the hoop, then we want to just apply some pressure and try and get that down in there. And if you're resisting, just like you see how this is, even though that just popped right into place just then, so I could have loosened it some to make sure that this goes in like it's supposed to, but I felt it slide in, so I'm good. And let's turn over and take a look at it. So as you see, it did get in there, and here we have it hooped. And notice how the stabilizer is nice and smooth. There's no, as you see the wrinkles here, there's none of that here. No distortion in our stabilizer. and it sounds like a drum. That's what you want to look for. You don't want it so tight that it could distort your stabilizer and then cause puckering. You want it to be snug, but not super tight, all right? So let's push this up just a little bit so that our hoop doesn't slide off while it is embroidering. And when you do this and apply this little bit of pressure just to make sure that that ring is below the edge, what that also does is help tighten this even more. Okay, so here we go. Our blanket is hooped. So now that our blanket is hooped, we're going to go ahead and take this in over to the Redline and start our embroidery. I have turned on the Redline, so it is ready for us to go ahead and get started with our embroidery project. What I do want to point out is on my Redline, what I decided to do was plug in a USB extension cord. The reason why I did that is because a lot of times there's wear and tear on your USB ports, either on your computers or on your machines. And what we don't want to do is wear out the one USB port on our equipment. So I decided to go ahead and put this extension cord so that what I could do is just beat this up by plugging in the USB ports from this area instead of over here, right? We want to protect the machine. And there will be a link in the description below for a USB extension cord. However, what we want to do is go ahead and attach our USB drive to our machine so that we can go ahead and get our design from off of the USB stick and onto the embroidery machine. I've placed the machine on no frame so that you can see the process of selecting the frame that we're going to work with. As I mentioned, her design is about 7 inches, actually 6.5 inches wide, round rather. So I'm using a round frame, and the frame is already preloaded in the embroidery machine. So we'll go ahead and pull that up now. So what you want to do is we want to go to the flowers here because that is the button for our embroidery design. So let's touch there. And here is our design menu. All of these designs are stored in the embroidery machine. So we want to touch our hard drive, floppy disk. For those of you who remember what a floppy disk is, we want to touch there. Then we want to select our disk. And the file that we want is this one here, the Ruby Rose DST. And in order to bring that file in, we're going to touch the book, basically telling it to bring the file over into our machine. So we're going to put our design in spot number 15 because that's the next available slot. And we're going to leave all of that where it is and click OK. And it is now importing the data for us. So let's back out of this menu, which is the floppy drive menu, and go to our designs menu. Now it's in here twice because there's 2 different sizes for this design. So we want to choose design number 15. And what we want to do is touch the needle with the flower, because what that pretty much does is tells the machine, hey, we're ready to go ahead and bring in that embroidery design. So let's touch there. And as of right now, we don't have a frame selected, nor do we have our design loaded. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and pick the frame that we want to work with. The reason for that is so that we can make sure that once we upload once we lock in the embroidery design, we want to make sure that it's going to fit the frame. So let's touch our frame, and it tells us that there's no frame. So let's go to frame select. Once we go to frame select, we're going to touch that, and then we're going to use our arrow keys to move to the frame that is 190 by 190. That's our circle frame. So let's use our arrow keys, and we're going to look for that measurement, which on mine is clothing frame G. So I'm going to select that and hit the check mark, and it says frame will move, because what the machine is going to do is recalibrate the arms to where the circle frame center is going to be. All right, now that we have our circle frame center, we're going to exit out of this menu. And now we're going to load up our design. So let's go ahead and hit the needle with the up and down arrow with the slash through it and let it know, yes, we're actually ready to bring in our embroidery design. So here is our design. All right, I'm going to double check the frame along with the design to make sure that it is centered, number one, and make sure that the design will fit inside the frame. So once you hit frame select, it's bringing up our circle, and here is our design in the circle. Now it's not centered, so I need to make sure that I move this where it's going to be centered in the frame. All right, so that looks a lot more centered, and it should stitch out just fine with it being in this area. So one of the things that is always suggested is that you always trace the design. All right, so that's the next step. We're going to go ahead and trace out the design with the hoop, but first we need to put the hoop and the project on the machine. So hold on, let's go ahead and get that situated. Here is our project hooped and ready to go. So what I'm going to do is slide the hoop on the machine up under the clip arms and just slide that straight back, and it clicks into place. So this is here. I see that the needle, which I'm listed under needle number 1, it's in the center of this hoop. Everything looks great, but I still need to do an outline check. So let's go ahead and click that. And it's going to ask confirm move frame along the design outline, and I want to say yes. And so now I can watch this needle to make sure that it is not going to hit that frame while it is embroidering. So it's going around the whole outside of the design. And so far, everything's great. So now our design is situated where I want it to be. It's not going to hit the frame while it stitches out. So I'm going to tell it to go ahead and start stitching. And the first thing I'm going to do is use a blue base so that we can lock this nap down up under the design. And the blue is needle number 4, and I'm going to go ahead and tell it to start. My tack down is done, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. So the next step is to do the rose or the flower that's in the middle, and I want to use number 3, which is a bright red. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to change my needle to number 3, and now that I have number 3, I'm ready to stitch. So let's go ahead and start the machine. All right, our design has finished. So let's go ahead and unhoop it and let you see what this looks like out of the hoop. So we slide it off, and here is our finished blanket free of the machine. So let's take this hoop off, and I'm going to set this off to the side so that you can see. Notice how the embroidery is nice and clear, free from pile all over the front of the design. And it is flattened all the way around the design. So it allows for the embroidery design to turn out absolutely gorgeous, to stand out on its own. Now, earlier I mentioned how tearaway would, in my opinion, not work as well with this particular project because this is the cutaway. But notice how this grid is all the way around the design. So if I were to tear this away, yes, it would tear away a circle, basically a clean circle, and leave, but you can still see the white that's in between the middle of that. So it's like, what's the point if you're still going to be able to see the stabilizer? In most instances, the tearaway, you pull it off to allow for a cleaner look and a cleaner finish. But in this instance, it won't be that way because the grid holds down most of the stabilizer. So we're just going to trim around here and finish off our blanket. We have our stabilizer cut away, and now we have a completed blanket with tack down embroidery. So the Sherpa blankets are totally awesome to use for an embroidery project. You would just do really well to have the tack down stitch put up under your design initially, and then whatever embroidery design you wish to put on there afterwards is going to turn out absolutely gorgeous. So I definitely want to thank you guys for joining me with this particular project today, and also joining us with the Redline machine to stitch this gorgeous design out for my daughter. So I hope you guys give this a try. If you do and you wish to show us what your project looks like, you can join us at the Hoop Group, and the link is in the description below. It is at our website, thebabysbooty.com, where you can join the Hoop Group and showcase your special projects that you've done on your embroidery machine as well. Also, if you have any questions, you definitely can reach out to us there as well at the Hoop Group. Otherwise, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And until the next time we see you, we hope you have happy embroidering.